The next speaker has been extremely instrumental in creating this event, Deepa Driver. She's been an observer in Old Bailey day after day, week after week, which means that you get up 2 o'clock in the morning to queue up for the 2 seats that are there in the public gallery, which houses a couple of hundred people, but they allow only 1 person or 2 persons to come in there. And Deepa has been with all of the hearings on Julian Assange in the Old Bailey. And now she's, partly with support from Fritt Ord in Norway, working for a group called Bridge, where we're trying to put together groups that don't work together always and try to get a dialogue on what's happening in Europe in the wake of what's happening to Julian, which is much more than just one man, of course. Deepa.
It's really a pleasure to be here on this stage alongside very many people that I watch on YouTube, like many of you do, admire and look up to. And particularly to embarrass John by saying how much of a historic moment it is that we can talk about this fantastic range of issues so openly across people with different political and other persuasions. But before I start, I want to share a little audio recording. It's in Arabic, so you may want to pay close attention to the subtitles. Once we've listened to that, I have a few comments. Thanks.
ميتين؟ وهم هلا معك بالسيارة؟ انت هلا وين متخبي هلا؟ وين انت هلا محمية؟
السيارة.
جوا السيارة انت صح؟ مش برا السيارة.
صح.
طيب خليكي يا عمري بالسيارة، أنا رح أتمني فاتح الخط معاكي، أتمني أحكي معك، ما بدي أسكر التليفون، تمام؟
الدبابة جنبية.
الدبابة وين؟
جنبية.
الدبابة جنبكم؟ ما عم تتحرك ولا واقفة؟ نزل حدا منها؟
هي بتتحرك.
تتحرك؟ طيب هي بتتحرك جنب السيارة ولا هي جاي من ورا السيارة أو من قدام السيارة؟
من قدام السيارة.
هي جاي عليكي من قدام السيارة الدبابة؟ قريب كتير؟
كتير.
وعم تمشي؟ طيب ما بدنا نخاف.
نحكي معي.
أنا معك يا عمري. أنا معك. أنا معك ليجي حدا ياخذك، ما بدي أسيبك لحالك.
لما يجي حدا بتفصل
إيه؟
لما يجي حدا يكون بتفصلي.
لا أنا بدي أتمني معاكي لأطمن إنه حدا هلال أو حدا جاي ياخذك. بديش أفصل حتى أنت إذا أجا لا سمح الله الجيش ما تفصلي، خلي الخط مفتوح، ما بدنا نفصل، أنا معاكي. إيش يا عمري؟ يا حبيبتي يا عمري والله معك، هيني أنا مش تاركك بحكي معاكي، ما بدي أصلا أتركك. إيه؟ إيش؟ حبيبتي والله لو بإيدي لأجيكي نحكي يا الله. يا رب احمينا.
يا رب احمينا.
I think anybody who has a niece, nephew, child, grandchild of that age cannot but be moved by what we heard. The child, Hind, in that video was 6. She had just witnessed the killing of the entirety of her family by Israeli tanks. And just before this call, the Palestinian Red Crescent had been talking to her 15-year-old sibling. And when the 15-year-old sibling died, then the child was left alone. Not long after this, she even got to speak to her mother, briefly. And Al Jazeera has done a little reconstruction 12 days after the incident of what happened thereafter, which is now available on Twitter and YouTube, etc. And what we find is that the Palestinian Red Crescent ambulance, which was dispatched to get her, was at one point 1 minute away. And then suddenly they lost contact, and 5 minutes later, you couldn't find them. And then later we find out that there were 3 tanks in that area with guns pointed towards, towards the vehicle, and the ambulance workers as well as the child have died. And she survived long enough to tell us what happened about her family. And the live streaming of the genocide in Gaza is something that has allowed many of us to understand the brutality and the horrific nature of war. And really, I would like to pause for a minute, because I can see a lot of very, very moved people around the room, and rightly so. Because this should not happen. We should not be witnessing this. And we should not be witnessing the provision of arms after this. And I think I want to also take you to some pictures around the room. You may have noticed them as you came in. Some of you who were here at John's beautiful previous event may have seen them. Some of them are drawn by my friend Sabri al-Qureshi, who's one of the most prolific painters from Guantanamo, who learned painting while he was there, who learned how to express himself through his art. Sabri was introduced to me by my dear friend Mohammadou Ul-Slahi, who spent 15 years at Guantanamo without charge or trial. And the painting in the middle, the one of the flower, which is half dead and half alive, is how one of the guests at one of John's events, Mansour Adaifi, described how he felt when he was at Guantanamo. He was alive, but he was dead. And whether it is Hind, the child, whether it is the atrocities that were committed, one of them you can see up there, where you see the force feeding that was done to the men at Guantanamo, where they were, the way in which hunger strikes were broken, leave alone the traumatization of the men with dogs. Boys as young as 14, Omar Khadr was 14 and a bit when he went to Guantanamo, and he was taken there. These and the crime I'm just about to show you are crimes that, we thought we had become more civilized than this. So if I could request the last one to be shown.
For more than 2.5 years, the wire service Reuters has been trying to find out what happened to their 2 staff members. This street in the suburb of New Baghdad. WikiLeaks says this is what happened.
Yep, he's got a weapon too. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18, have 5 to 6 individuals with AK-47s. We got an RPG. All right, we got a guy with
The voice on the tape, presumably a member of the military, says there has been shooting in the area and receives permission to open fire.
When people are labelled as insurgents, are they really insurgents? It seems to be the case that from the scenes in this video, that any person that is not a man and sometimes not a woman is by default labelled as an insurgent.
Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire. Hey, Roger. Keep shooting. God damn it, Kyle. All right. I hit him. Oh, yeah, look at those dead bastards. Nice. 2-6, crazy.
From a distance, you hear the voices on the tape watch as the wounded try to crawl to help. But when help arrives...
Come on, let us shoot.
You're engaged.
1-8, engage. Clear. Come on. Clear. Oh, yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
In this video, I think you see the corruption of pilots and the military by war itself, in particular by the modern nature of aerial warfare. So you see these young pilots acting like they're playing video games, only the high scores they are getting are with real human lives.
We call frequency. Yeah, I just drove over a body. Yeah.
Viper 5-2, report free change zone 4.
Even from high above, the harsh reality becomes evident as the troops that arrive find 2 children wounded. You see them carry their small bodies and call for help.
Hey, I need to get the brass to drop ramps. I got a wounded girl. We need to take the rest of mine.
The response on the tape...
Oh, it's their fault for bringing their kids to a battle. That's right.
Patty Colhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
So that was an extract from a video which you can find, and I encourage all my students and people I know to watch it. It's you might want to stop that now, thank you. It's at the website collateralmurder.wikileaks.org, and I urge you to watch. There's a short version of the video, there's a longer version, and at the bottom, the third version is a version including the experiences of one of the people you heard on the tape, Ethan McCord. He is an American soldier who explains what he saw on the ground. And unlike in the video with Hind, where she is reporting her own execution, here, these people, those people who weren't live streaming their killing, we know their names, we know they exist, that they are people. We know that Doa and Sajad Mutashir, whose father stopped as a good Samaritan, you see the truck that tries to rescue people? It had 2 children in the front, 5-year-old Doa and 10-year-old Sajad. And their father stopped on their way to take them to school to pick up a wounded person on you as a good Samaritan would. And nobody would have known what happened to him or to the 2 Reuters journalists who were also in that video, had it not been for Chelsea Manning's courage. Like Craig here, she's a courageous whistleblower. And the courage of WikiLeaks, not just Julian Assange, but WikiLeaks, all the people who were involved, in saying to the United States when they say, take this down, well, we won't take it down when there is evidence of a war crime. And for a small organization to do that at a time when The Guardian was willing to smash its, not long after, you see The Guardian smashing its computers in order to impress the British security state. You have a person of great courage, and what is being done to him right now in Britain is an utter travesty. For the last 5 odd years, I have served on behalf of the Haldean Society of Socialist Lawyers, the European Lawyers for Democracy and World Human Rights, whose report was on one of the pictures that Ermendur showed from Rojava, and on behalf of the Unified European Left in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, as the legal observer in Julian's case. And I've attended both the procedural hearings, the more administrative things, as well as the actual substantive hearings. And what has shocked me to some extent is not just the blatant display of power, and I will report a little bit back from the court hearing, because I know Craig will probably spend most of his time talking about the ICJ hearing, but also the silence of lawyers who should be concerned about the way in which the judicial system in the UK, in Sweden, in other countries is being misused to hide evidence of criminality, serious criminality, systematic criminality, but also the complicity of journalists and the way in which people are propagandized by appeals to their higher motives. And those higher motives are misused in order to silence the real critique, which is we should be paying attention to this and stopping this. In terms of Julian's court hearing, just to give you John asked me to give you a flavor of what happened on the 2 days. On the first day, Julian's lawyers tried to show that what Julian had disclosed was of great journalistic value, of great public interest value, had an important political motive behind it, which is an anti-war motive, and therefore was subject to the protections of both the extradition treaty between the US and the UK and the Extradition Act. And they also tried to set out a little timeline to show how the United States case was not accidental, and how while the United States was obviously frustrated with the evidence of its war crimes being made available, including the killing of journalists, right? The United States didn't start to do anything until what was released was the Vault 7 leaks. And these are leaks which show that the United States intelligence agencies can hack very easily into people's cars, into their computers, and plant evidence of trails related to other countries, which you should never have, they should never have that access at all. So the provision of that information really annoyed the intelligence agencies, and that led to what we now know as Julian's extraction from the Ecuadorian embassy in London on the basis of an arrangement which the British minister, former Minister Alan Duncan, has shown, in his memoirs, he's shown how he was involved in facilitating this deal, and Ecuador got a several billion-pound IMF loan in the process, and as a result, Julian's privileged legal documentation was given to the Americans. And the Americans, in all of this, the fact that they have spied on Julian's privileged conversations extensively, the proof is on YouTube. You can watch Julian having conversations with his lawyers, which means you can't get a fair trial. The fact that the UK is involved means that you can't even get a fair trial in the UK. They have plotted to assassinate him. On the streets of Knightsbridge, they intended to either poison him or kidnap him and engage in a street fight with guns. And this was discussed at the highest levels with Pompeo and Trump and others. What was also very interesting is the idea that the primary FBI witness against Julian has recanted his testimony and said he made it up on the basis of a bribe from the Americans. Despite all of this, the British justice, what is most extraordinary is that the British justice system doesn't care that lawyers are spied upon or this is going on. As an observer, what I've found really hard in the last 5 years is to be able to get into court. Now, when my colleagues go to Turkey, when they go to Russia, when they go to other places to observe hearings in the so-called enemy states, you expect, difficulties accessing the court. But some of the worst difficulties have been in the UK, which is supposedly a rule of law state. I have had bizarre conversations with the staff who let you in, who say you can have pen and paper inside, but you're not allowed to write. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. I've been intimidated by the police outside the court, where they threaten to arrest you because you're queuing for the court. I mean, this is just unheard of. And one of the reasons why you are here and I was there is because we are bearing witness and we are saying we will not participate or close our eyes to the horrific nature of what is being revealed, or to the silencing of a journalist to avoid having accountability for what was done. And in that sense, I mean, it really amused me that I said a little bit about what Julian's lawyers said about, how they laid out a number of different topics. But what was interesting was, to me, quite a lot, was what the Americans said on day 2. And I was in court, in the main court, for the first time. I had a proper seat in court, although Craig and I have a funny story about that, which if you come to dinner, we can tell you about. The Americans' arguments was absolutely surreal. Chelsea Manning is a thief. She's not a whistleblower. This is the person who's whistleblown on the most serious war crimes in a couple of generations. Julian Assange is not a journalist. And he's not a real journalist, because there is a difference between him and other journalists, because he is just a co-conspirator of Chelsea Manning. They can reformulate the charges once he is in the US so that he can be eligible for the death penalty. So they don't deny that. The fact that, they don't deny the fact that what he is facing is either the death penalty or, even the expert witnesses, the evidence was unchallenged, at least 40 years, that is the rest of his natural life, in an 8x12 concrete cell. This is pre-trial, where he's in his cell 23 hours a day. If he is under special administrative measures, to be moved from that cell to another cell to do individual exercise, he will need a 3-person hold, which means that he will be shackled, manacled, and 3 people will have to be available, which means he only gets exercise when 3 people are available. His calls to the FBI will be monitored. He will get 2 phone calls of 15 minutes a month. And this is for the crime of telling the truth. And the fact that he faces the death penalty it was mind-blowing for me, given the kinds of position that we have on the death penalty. I also want to say a little bit about the why is this not about, why should you are here with a cafe around your shoulder, you care about Palestine, somebody else cares about the environment, somebody else cares about other important burning crises. But why should we pay attention to the case of Julian Assange right now? And the answer is, it's because we care about these other things that the case of Julian Assange matters. Because if they win on this, what they are saying is anybody who tells the truth can be just extracted without a judicial process, using the subterfuge of the extradition process, because in that you don't have a jury trial, you just have a single judge and then this dreadful process, and whisked off to the US to be punished for the crime of telling the truth. And if we do that to the people who tell us the truth, then we cannot expect to know the truth. I would also like to say that, it can be very heavy watching this genocide, feeling very alone. So it's very important that we are here together to see that there are others with us who may disagree with us on various things or how we get there. But we all care about this, and it really matters. And also to say that we won't just sit, watch this, and go away. Whatever little we can do, we will do, whether it is in our trade union, whether it is challenging the narrative, whether it is putting a sticker in the window, whether it's standing outside the Old Bailey, whether it's somebody like me going and sitting in court and taking notes and reporting back. Whatever it is we can do within our abilities, we can. Because when I put my children to bed every night and give them a hug or have a silly argument with them, I know that Julian and Stella are losing those beautiful moments. They have a 6-year-old and a 4.5-year-old who've never visited Julian outside the prison and had a meaningful conversation, and he's lost out as well. And it's not just about them and feeling sorry for Julian, because Julian is a symbol of other things, not just of democracy and free press and human rights. He's a symbol of imagination, as my friend Davida Darmina says, of this imagination to be able to conceive a different world, to look at this media which is stultified and ossified and kind of limited by the few millionaires who own it, and say, no, we'll have something different and we will challenge you. We will stand up to you. And when people have that courage, we stand with them. And we do our best to make sure that they win, because he's already lost a lot, but we have lost a lot more. Thank you.